Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine now. And Joe, this is very timely music today, isn't it?
Indeed, Bob. Hello from Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. And this is a song that was released yesterday on Ukrainian Independence Day. The voice you hear is that of Chief Rabbi of Ukraine, Moshe Osman. And he's been one of the great voices of Ukraine's fight for freedom these past 18 months. And the rabbi, he's been down in Kherson. He was under shelling when he was trying to help victims of the Russian destruction of the Novokakhovka Dam. He travels the country and he goes around the world raising support for Ukraine. And he's a reminder that, Ukraine is not the politicians. It's the people. It's the civil society leader. It's the religious leaders. It's all these people together that make up this idea of Ukraine. And in this song, it's called Ray of the Sun. And as he's walking around Kyiv, a city that he loves very much, in the music video, he's singing, "Wake up, people, take a new step into a new life. God supports us." In the Crane's song, "We, the renewed people, will preserve our freedom." And he sings of this idea of renewal. And I was thinking about that as I woke up this morning in Kyiv. Yesterday, Independence Day, and also marking the beginning of the 19th month of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And, your first thought, on all these big holidays, there's always apprehension. Will Russia do something extraordinary to prove that they're still, that they have power and that the world should be afraid? And so, I woke up here in Kyiv, and the first thought, you look at your phone to check and see, first you make sure you're alive, and then you say, were there attacks throughout the country last night? Was there something extraordinary? And it was a fairly quiet night. Despite, obviously always the fighting at the front lines, yet again, another day has passed, another momentous holiday has passed where Ukraine, and I think we can definitely say these words as I walk around Kyiv today, and as the rabbi was singing in that song, Ukraine is triumphing. We can say that definitively. I think back to Independence Day a year ago, there was a lot of fear, Russia's going to have to do something big to prove that they're still strong. And there's a Ukrainian, Alina Polyakova. She's the editor of the English edition of Ukrainska Pravda. And she had a story yesterday in the Spectator magazine. And she talks about how afraid everyone was last year on the eve of Independence Day. She said here in Kyiv, it was hard to find a cafe open. People had fled the city, taking their kids and into the mountains. And it was a very heavy sense. And she writes in The Spectator, "This year I'm in a completely different mood. There's a completely different vibe all around us. We are not scared anymore." And I was speaking yesterday with friends who were recalling those first hours and days here in Kyiv when people who had never picked up a gun were lining up to pick up weapons to do whatever they could to defend the city. And everyone thought that that there was going to be guerrilla warfare. No one, I think everyone was resolved not to give up. But they thought they'd have to fight, sort of building to building in Kyiv. And now, 2 Independence Days have passed since Russia's big invasion. And I think, this gets missed in the headlines because of what happened on the 23rd of August with the plane carrying Prigozhin, formerly, one of Putin's closest advisors, the leader of the very brutal Wagner group. That plane went down. It seems that Prigozhin's dead. That dominated the headlines, always something to keep people a little bit afraid of Vladimir Putin. But the biggest story from here, and I think a story that should resonate around the world, is that Russia is actually incapable of doing something extraordinary. And we've been through so many major holidays and anniversaries, whether it was February 24th of this year, the anniversary of the full-scale invasion, or yesterday, where we see the day passes in relative peace. In fact, it was only in the early hours of yesterday, of Independence Day, the Russians did hit the city of Dnipro in the south. They destroyed a bus terminal. So, terrible. It's a terrible act of terrorism. And we see that Russia is capable of terrorism. They're capable of throwing bodies at the front line. But what they're not capable of is destroying Ukrainian cities. And I think this really is a sign that Ukraine is triumphing. The price is very high. But we see that we can say that there already is success. And then the other good news we have to report, in this long, grueling counteroffensive the Ukrainians have taken a village called Rubitny. It's about 50 or 78 miles southeast of the city of Zaporizhia. But what this means is that they've broken through that first line of Russian defense. The Russians had put many minefields down there in Zaporizhia, and by taking this village, Ukrainians are now approaching the second line of Russian defense. They need more ammunition. They're losing a lot of lives, but they're not losing ground, and that's a very important thing to reiterate. As here, I'm in Kyiv, a city full of life, people going about their daily lives after 18 or 19 months of Russia's full-scale invasion.
And today, Ukraine saying they've landed troops on the shores of Crimea, a very complex, ambitious operation. So that all is good news. And there's something that I meant to bring up the other day to you, Joseph, after the Republican debate. And there was a lot of talk about all of the candidates, including Christie. And I don't know if you can do this quickly, but you have a very bizarre story involving Christie, don't you?
Yeah, and maybe I can tell this quickly, and maybe it's a pretext for further conversations as we look at how the election in the U.S. will affect Ukraine's struggle or fight for victory. Mm-hmm. But when I was protege to Roger Ailes, the chairman of Fox News, I was in my mid-20s during that crazy time, and I was sort of the prince of the empire of Fox. And Roger, at his mansion overlooking the Hudson Valley across from West Point, beautiful place with this all-glass dining room, there often were pretty extraordinary dinners. And as I was just a young kid pulled into this powerful world. And one night we had a dinner with Rush Limbaugh, Roger Ailes, Christie. If you can get a visual on that, you can picture the girth, the gravitas of these people
and girth,
yeah. And then we had Glenn Beck, a few of the women from Fox. I think Megyn Kelly was there, and when I was sitting there among these great personages, I always had my notebook ready. I expected to learn so much. We have so many problems around the world, and you have all these people with allegedly great minds, definitely with great power and gravitas around that table. And I expected this to be a very serious and powerful conversation, as I have with friends here now in a cafe in Ukraine. And I was amazed at how empty the conversation was and how fearful everyone was. At the time, Barack Obama was president, and at Roger's behest, everyone went around the table, and Karl Rove was there too, by the way. Everyone went around the table and had to give, on a scale of 1 to 10, a number of how afraid they were for the American Republic. If it was 10, it means we're going to collapse. And everyone had to say a public number and then a private number. And so privately, everyone said, oh, we're at 8 or 9 and we're going to collapse, in a few years. And then publicly, they said, we tell people things aren't so bad. And it was the most empty, preposterous, ridiculous conversation, like that scene from the movie The Sandlot, when the kids are telling ghost stories about the dog next door and scaring themselves. So here we have these most powerful people in America sitting there just telling tales to make themselves feel powerful by scaring themselves. Wow. And no wonder we end up with problems like we see around the world. And that's why I love being in Ukraine. Everyone here, whether they're the regular people here, are completely committed to stand for freedom, to risk their lives for it, to organize for it, while in the powerful places with all the resources in the world, people eat their big steak dinners and have the silliest, most ridiculous conversations I've ever witnessed.
And another reason we love talking to you, Joe, because as I've said many times, with all your experiences, you're the most interesting man in the world. And we'll connect with you again on Monday. I hope you have a peaceful weekend.
Thank you, Bob. Until Monday.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Ебать.